Hi everybody, welcome to Open and Shut Book Reviews. It's Ken, thanks for joining me, and today's book is Eternal Life by Dara Horn. So the story basically is two star-crossed lovers, Rachel and Elazar. Their relationship's doomed from the start. They're both part of a culture that you're going to have an arranged marriage and you're going to like it, and that's it, and you don't fall in love with anybody else, or if you do, you don't act on it. Something happens, as things do in books, and they end up making a vow that renders both of them immortal. But there's a price. There's always a price. And so that's what the book is about, is how they both deal with the price of their immortality. I'm not going to spend a lot of time giving background on the various characters for this book, because getting to know them is part of the fun of this particular novel, I think. So just so you know, you have Rachel, who's the narrator, and you have Elazar, who is her first love, who she loves and hates with a passion because of stuff, because of reasons. He did things, but all will be revealed eventually if you read the book. So one of the things that I had a problem with this book is that there's a lot of, when you first start it, there's a lot of mental gymnastics, at least there was for me, because I was picturing a particular actress in my head for the part of Rachel, and when the book begins, you're not really sure how old Rachel is in this version of her life. And so I was constantly, I would read for a few paragraphs and then she'd say something, or another character would say something that would indicate to me, oh no, she's not that young, she's in her 80s. So I'd have to age up the character in my brain, but then she's in her 80s but doesn't quite look like she's in her 80s. She looks like maybe she's in her 60s. So then I had to do some more reimagining. And so yeah, there's a lot of mental gymnastics. For me, it took me out of the story a little bit until things kind of settle down. So when you have two characters who are immortal, it becomes this very interesting compare and contrast situation every time they meet, because they're not together all the time. When they would get together and catch up, it would remind me of those scenes in Doctor Who when the 11th Doctor, played by Matt Smith, would run into River Song, and they would compare notes in their journals to see when in time they were meeting, so that they wouldn't reveal any spoilers to each other. Yeah, we're not dealing with time travel in this book, just eternal life, but it's all in one direction. But still, I still got that feeling of them when they would compare notes of the Doctor and River Song, so that was fun for me. This made me think of immortality in a much different way than I ever have previously, because I'm a big fan of Doctor Who, but if you weren't the Doctor and you were stuck on Earth for all of your regenerations, you couldn't go anywhere, and you couldn't travel back and forth in time, you could just exist forever on Earth. That puts a little different spin on immortality. Immortality can be extremely boring because you don't know the future. Since you don't know the future, you're not guaranteed to be living in wonderful times the entire time you're immortal. Bad things do happen. There are really horrific periods in human history where genocides happen and climate change happens and wars. It's just so, yeah, it's not going to be all fun and great food and liquor and barbecues and YouTube and movies. There are going to be some bad times, and you're going to have to just live with it, all of it. So yeah, I don't think most people think about that when they think about how fun it would be to be immortal. And as things change, it gets a little bit harder to die and become someone else, especially in like the 21st century. That's one of the problems, and this isn't really much of a spoiler, that Rachel finds herself with, is how she's going to disappear and then reappear as someone else in the 21st century, where there's video everywhere of everything, it feels like, and where it can be really hard to prove who you are. Yeah, so it's a little bit more complicated than in the early days of her immortal life, where there was no internet. Records were all paper, and people paid in cash, gold, or some sort of currency that was paper. So not a lot of electronic identity trails that could be easily followed. So yeah, I thought that was fun to think about that aspect of being an immortal and having to die and reappear every 80 years or so. Rachel also seems to have been blessed and or cursed with a perfect memory, which would be horrible. She doesn't forget anybody. She remembers all of her kids, every good and bad thing. And that would be just torture, I think, because if you're human, you do stupid things and you want to forget those things. And sometimes you can manage to do it. But being cursed with perfect memory and eternal life, hell no. And you can't kill yourself because you're immortal. It doesn't actually do anything to you. It's just, you just keep going. So there are a couple other things I want to talk to you about, but in order to do so, we are going to have to go, yes, you guessed it, to the spoiler couch. Okay, so the only way, they're immortal regardless, okay? Both Rachel and Elazar are immortal. However, they do age, although Rachel could be 88, but still look like she's in her mid-60s. But she is still aging. She doesn't have any health problems. It's just, you know, physically she starts to look the part. If she wants to reset the clock back to when she first became immortal, which is when she was around, what, 16? She has to be burned alive. She has to burn her body alive. Wow. And it's weird because when your body burns, you respawn. It's like when you play those Call of Duty games where you were shot, you don't actually regenerate in the same place where you were killed. Your new body appears some distance away. Same thing happens for Rachel and Elazar. So when they burn, they wake up, I guess. They wake up in a completely different place. It might be in the same city. It might not be on the same continent. So it's really starting over, not only physically, but you don't know where you're going to end up. You don't know if you're going to speak the language of wherever you wake up. So that was an interesting twist. I really, really enjoyed that. I thought that was fun. I love how both of them deal with immortality differently. So she loves Elazar, but then again, she hates him because of basically his actions get her first husband, her arranged marriage, gets him killed. And she doesn't ever really completely forgive him for that, but she still passionately loves him, and she's still very much in lust with him after all this time too. So when they get together, they inevitably get together. But they both approach their immortality differently. For him, he just wants to be with her because he gets tired of loving somebody, marrying them, having kids, and then watching all of them die. He gets to bury his wife, he gets to bury his kids, usually from afar, because, you know, if the kids live long enough to die from old age, he can't be hanging around. Or in the worst case scenario, his kids don't live very long, depending on a million different things. They could die in childbirth, they could die young, it could be a plague, there could be a war, but he just gets to keep watching these people that he loves over and over die over and over. And so he just wants to be with Rachel because he's crazy about her, he's always loved her, and he won't ever have to bury her. So that's a big plus for him. For her, she can't quite forgive him even though she loves him, and she doesn't quite trust him completely. But the other big thing is the other curse of their immortality is they can't have kids together. For him, that's not a big deal. He doesn't care. For her, it's a deal breaker because she loves being a mom, and more than anything, if she was to stay with Elazar, she would want to have his kids. That's the big deal breaker. Her mistrust of him, of course, her loathing of him on a lot of levels for what he did. Even if she could put that aside, she needs to be a mom. There's also a revelation in the book where, and we're not sure if this is 100% fact or just extreme coincidence, but it seems that if they ever try to tell somebody that they're immortal, if they ever try to confide in someone, hey, I can't die, I'll prove it to you, let me put this gun to my head and pull the trigger, something will happen to foil their suicide attempt, and it will end up killing the other person. It'll end up killing the person they're trying to prove their immortality to. And it's happened enough times to Elazar that he's like, no, I will never ever try to tell anybody again that I care about that I'm immortal, because it never works out. They always die and he continues to live. So I thought that was really cool too. The whole thing with having to, I keep going back to having to burn in order to regenerate. That is the weirdest thing. I mean, nothing else will actually regenerate your body to start over again. I guess she tried killing herself with a gun. She put the gun in her mouth. She pulled the trigger. She heard a very loud bang, and it was uncomfortable. And then she was not dead. And she miraculously had no gunshot wound. It was all very strange the way it was described in the book, but apparently it was catastrophic enough that her body just healed it instantly, but not catastrophic enough to where she actually regenerated into her younger self again. So what happens if you drown? I mean, can you drown? What if you walked into the ocean and just started inhaling water? What happens? Do you just black out and bob to the surface and then start immediately choking and coughing all the water up out of your lungs? It's weird. I want to know more about this. And you don't seem to be able to, if the gunshot example is any indication, you don't seem to be able to do any permanent damage to your organs either. So I guess you couldn't die of a drug overdose because your liver would eventually heal itself. So it sounds like you're perfectly healthy. You just age and age and age and age. That's weird. It's all very weird. I love it though. I love it. I want to know more. Okay, that's it for the spoilers, so let's go back over here now. So as far as casting goes, as you know if you watch my book reviews, sometimes I will picture famous movie stars playing the different roles in the book. This didn't happen with too many of the key players in this one. I didn't picture anybody famous to play Elazar. For Rachel, I was picturing Cote de Pablo, formerly from NCIS. She was great on that show as Ziva David. I think she'd be perfect for this role if they ever do cast it as a movie. For Elazar's father, who's only in the book at the beginning, but he plays a key part in the story, and so my brain picked out someone with, I think, a lot of gravitas to play the part, and that was Christopher Lee, who of course is no longer with us and so could never actually be cast in this, but he, in my brain, he was perfect for that particular role. And then there's a character near the end of the book that Rachel meets who's named Nir, N-I-R, and for him, my brain decided it should be Jeff Goldblum, young Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park. Anyway, I highly recommend this book, not too many reservations about it. It was hard to put down. I had to make myself stop reading a couple of times, and even so, I finished it in about a day and a half. As always, I will put links to where you can pick up a copy of this book in the description box down below. And that's it. Thank you again for joining me. If you have any questions for me, or if you have any books that you would like to suggest I review, go ahead and send those to me, ken@openandshutreviews.com. I'll let you go. Thank you so much, and until next time, I'm Ken McKim. You take care, and read more books.